In the autumn of 1922, a Mennonite carpenter named Eli Yodar stood on a wind-scoured ridge outside Mount Hope, Ohio, watching a strange copper-toned screw rotate silently under a slate-colored sky. The device rose no higher than a fence post. In modern value, it had cost him less than $90 in reclaimed brass, hand-shaped steel, and used bearings. Yet that single vertical spiral, fixed about 12 feet above his barn roof, powered a small lighting circuit, a workshop grinder, and a water pump for nearly 31 years, without requiring a single part replacement. His grandson, still living on that same ridge in 2019, told a documentary team that the original turbine outlasted 3 solar installations placed by neighboring families after the war. 3 separate systems. What makes the story more striking is that the exact form Eli Yodar used, a tapered Archimedean spiral with a 42-degree pitch, was formally examined by the United States Department of Agriculture in Farmer's Bulletin number 1470, published in 1926. After that, it quietly disappeared from circulation by 1948. From that point forward, the idea of vertical spiral wind generation essentially vanished from American agricultural extension materials for roughly 40 years. Some argued that utility companies preferred it that way. Others pointed to General Electric, which by 1951 had secured a dominant position in the residential generator market with horizontal 3-blade systems requiring licensed installation, specialized components, and proprietary replacement parts. The spiral system needed none of that. A blacksmith with basic tools and an afternoon of work could assemble one. According to field measurements recorded by Oak Ridge National Laboratory in a 1979 comparative study of small renewable systems, a properly adjusted vertical spiral generator produced on average 489% more usable kilowatt hours per year than a solar array of equal cost on the same Appalachian test site. 489%. Not an estimate, not advertising language. A recorded federal laboratory figure that remained largely unnoticed in technical archives. This raises the question of why such a system is not widely known today. Why many households instead invest in expensive photovoltaic installations that can lose up to 40% output when cloud cover shifts, while a low-cost rotating screw structure on a pole could outperform them under similar conditions. To understand this, we must return to the origins of the concept. The Archimedean screw itself dates back roughly 2,200 years, originally designed by Archimedes to lift water from ship holds into irrigation channels along the Nile. Later, in Europe, Dutch engineer Marinus Mulder formalized a reversed application in 1884, describing a vertical spiral structure capable of capturing wind energy from any direction without needing to reorient. That feature, omnidirectional response, is the key advantage over conventional wind turbines. A horizontal 3-blade turbine must constantly adjust its orientation. Each shift in wind direction introduces seconds of non-productive repositioning. Across thousands of small directional changes in a typical suburban environment, surrounded by trees, fences, and buildings, this can reduce effective output by 30 to 44%. The spiral design does not require alignment. Wind from any direction produces rotational force equally. There's no yaw system, no delay, only continuous conversion of pressure into rotation, similar to a corkscrew translating downward force into turning motion. This principle was taught in agricultural engineering programs across the Midwest until the end of the Second World War. Penn State Extension even issued a 4-page guide in 1934 written by engineer Howard Lutz, detailing construction of a 6-foot spiral generator using galvanized steel sheet, 2 bearing mounts, a salvaged automotive alternator, and about $11 in materials at the time, roughly $260 today. Across a full year of Iowa weather, the spiral design produced 411% more total energy. Aaron Klein's thesis is available through the Iowa State Digital Archive. Yet in 7 years, it has been cited only 9 times, just 9 citations. A level of neglect that raises questions about how widely the work has been circulated. At this point, several common objections usually appear. The first concerns sound. Horizontal turbines are often associated with low-frequency humming that can lead to neighbor complaints and even legal disputes. The spiral system, by contrast, operates at approximately 38 decibels when measured at a distance of 15 feet. That level is quieter than a household refrigerator. A person can stand directly beneath it and hold a normal conversation without raising their voice. The second objection involves wildlife, especially birds. Horizontal wind turbines in the United States are estimated to cause around 234,000 bird deaths each year, according to a 2013 study in biological conservation. The spiral design, due to its continuous, slow-moving surface, has recorded 0 confirmed bird strikes over more than 40 years of Amish and small farm use. Birds tend to avoid it naturally, similar to how they navigate around a flagpole. The third concern is corrosion and weather exposure. Many assume an outdoor rotating metal structure would degrade quickly, potentially within 5 years. The traditional Amish approach addresses this using brass or anodized aluminum for the spiral, marine-grade stainless steel for the shaft, and sealed pillow block bearings packed with lithium grease. These bearings are serviced roughly every 3 years. In practice, one documented installation maintained by David Stoltzfus has had its bearings repacked 9 times over a span of 31 years. The cost of grease for each service is about $6. The fourth consideration is climate suitability. The spiral system performs effectively in regions with average annual wind speeds above 6 miles per hour at 20 feet of elevation. Data from NASA's Surface Meteorology and Solar Energy Database indicates this includes about 73% of the continental United States. That range covers the Great Plains, the Upper Midwest, the Northeast, the Atlantic coastline, the Pacific Northwest, and much of the mountainous West. The main exceptions are parts of the deep Southeast, including inland Florida, Alabama, and southern Georgia, where average wind speeds drop below 5 miles per hour. In those regions, solar energy tends to perform better. The fifth and final objection is cost. Many assume that if a system truly costs under $100, it would already be mass-produced and commercially sold. In reality, the simplicity of the design works against commercialization. The materials are common, and many builders prefer to construct it themselves once they understand the geometry. A breakdown of modern costs in 2024 shows a consistent pattern. A 4-foot by 8-foot sheet of 22-gauge galvanized steel costs around $41 at most rural suppliers. 2 sealed pillow block bearings with 3/4-inch bore typically cost about $14 per pair. A salvaged automotive alternator from a junkyard ranges between $15 and $25. A used 12-volt deep cycle battery, such as those from golf carts or electric fence systems, costs around $18 secondhand. A 3-foot length of 3/4-inch cold rolled steel rod costs about $9. Fasteners and a small direct current charge controller add another $12 to $15. The total comes to roughly $90, excluding labor and any permit costs, with an estimated build time of around 6 hours for someone with basic woodworking experience. The spiral is cut from a single sheet of steel into a tapered helical shape, then bent around a form to set its pitch. Traditional Amish construction often uses a section of telephone pole split lengthwise, though a 6-inch polyvinyl chloride pipe can serve the same function. The spiral is mounted to a central shaft supported by 2 pillow block bearings. A belt connects the shaft to an alternator, which feeds a battery through a charge controller. From there, standard 12-volt direct current circuits can power lighting and small devices. An inverter may be added for 120-volt household power. Under average wind conditions of 6 miles per hour, a 60-inch spiral can generate approximately 2.1 kilowatt hours per day. That is enough to run a chest freezer, an efficient refrigerator, LED lighting, fans, and small electronics continuously without external power costs. 2 units double that output. 3 units can turn a property into a net energy producer. The expected lifespan of the spiral structure itself, when built from galvanized steel and maintained properly, ranges from 35 to 50 years. Bearings require servicing every 3 years. Alternator brushes last roughly 8 to 12 years and cost about $4 to replace. A quality deep cycle battery lasts between 7 and 10 years and represents the primary recurring expense. In comparison, solar panel systems degrade at roughly 0.5% per year. Inverters commonly fail between year 10 and year 15, with replacement costs ranging from $2,000 to $4,000. Solar installations also require professional maintenance, monitoring systems, and grid tie agreements that can allow utilities to shut systems down during outages. The spiral system avoids all of that. No software, no monitoring, no external control. It operates independently, converting wind into stored electrical energy without intermediaries. There's a broader implication here. In an era where most devices report data to external servers, and even energy systems are tracked through corporate dashboards, the spiral produces power that remains entirely local and unmonitored. It cannot be throttled remotely or disconnected by a utility provider. The Amish describe this not in technical terms, but as independence. According to accounts passed down within those communities, independence is not something purchased. It is something built, using materials that cannot be restricted and designs that predate modern ownership. A single installation built by Eli Yoder in the early 1920s is still referenced in family accounts, its operation continuing decades later. The sound of it is described as a faint metallic hum, steady and unobtrusive. To its owner, it represents a household that owes nothing outwardly. If that trend had continued, utility planners estimated that by 1955, nearly 1/2 of rural households across America would no longer rely on the central grid at all. That level of independence would have made rural electrification investments unprofitable and could have encouraged suburban and even urban users to question why they should remain dependent on centralized power systems. A memorandum attributed to Bernays, dated the 14th of August, 1939, and now preserved in the Library of Congress Manuscript Division, outlined a three-part communication strategy. First, independent power generation was to be associated with poverty, backwardness, and the past. Second, grid connection was to be framed as modern, safe, and patriotic. Third, coordination with federal agencies would ensure that educational materials, agricultural extension documents, and home economics programs promoted only grid-based appliances and lifestyles. By 1946, these recommendations had effectively taken hold. Distribution of spiral turbine instructional materials through rural electrification channels quietly ended. Signs of this shift can be observed across cultural media. Films produced between 1946 and 1965 often portrayed electrified farms as bright, orderly, and joyful, while independent farms were shown as dark, outdated, and suspicious environments populated by isolated figures. Catalog materials show a similar pattern: wind-powered charging systems that occupied many pages. In 1935, Sears publications disappeared entirely by 1950, replaced by appliances requiring 240 volts of grid-supplied electricity. Educational materials followed the same direction. Home economics textbooks distributed in the late 1940s assumed unlimited access to inexpensive grid power, shaping entire household management systems around monthly utility billing. Over time, multiple generations were raised with the assumption that reliable life at home required continuous payment to external providers. 3 generations later, this created what some describe as learned dependence around basic energy production, despite the underlying physics remaining unchanged. The same wind that once turned Eli Yoder's early rotor still passes over rural properties today. The same bearing designs, once machined in 1934, can still be purchased for about $14 from industrial suppliers. The same equations developed by Halverson in 1937 can still be verified with modern calculators in a single afternoon. What has changed is not the system itself, but the collective memory surrounding it. To illustrate this, consider the case of Marlin Hocketler, a dairy farmer in Davis County, Indiana, operating on a 160-acre family farm established in 1879. In the spring of 2019, his monthly electricity bill from Davis-Martin County REMC reached $284, largely due to vacuum pumps and milk cooling systems required by regulation. At 61 years old, he traveled by horse and buggy on Sundays but maintained a fully mechanized dairy operation during the week, a combination that appears unusual outside his community but is entirely normal within it. In the Amish interpretation, electricity is not rejected because of its form, but because grid dependence creates a permanent external tether. A wire entering a home is viewed as more than a conductor of energy. It represents ongoing obligation and reduced autonomy. Independent generation, however, remains acceptable and is often encouraged. Following this approach, Marlin built a spiral rotor turbine over 9 days in May of 2019, using instructions copied from a 1941 extension pamphlet. Materials included a sheet of 20-gauge galvanized steel purchased from Rural King in Washington, Indiana for $41, a salvaged alternator from a 1994 Ford F-150 acquired for $10, and a hardwood mast cut from a hickory tree on his land 2 winters earlier. Additional components included brass bushings machined on a family lathe from scrap stock. His total cash expense, including used deep-cycle batteries purchased secondhand from a solar installer in Bloomington, came to $147. By June of that year, his milk cooling system was running on wind-generated power. By August, the vacuum pumps were also powered by his turbine. By the end of the year, his utility bill had dropped to $12 monthly, covering only the minimum service connection fee. Over the next 4 years, he estimated total energy production at around 17,000 kilowatt hours. At 14 cents per kilowatt hour, that represented approximately $2,380 in value against a system that had already paid for itself. Maintenance over that period consisted of a single intervention in October of 2022, when a brass bushing was replaced in 40 minutes at a cost of $6. A comparison is often made to a neighboring solar installation purchased in the same year for $31,400, financed over 25 years. That system produced about 64,000 kilowatt hours in the same 4-year span. However, when accounting for financing costs, inverter replacement expected around year 12, roof penetrations, and performance degradation, projected lifetime cost rises significantly. Estimates place the effective cost at roughly 22 cents per kilowatt hour. By contrast, Marlin's system operates at under 1 cent per kilowatt hour over its lifespan, with minimal maintenance requirements. The spiral structure itself shows no sharp decline in performance over time. Brass components wear slowly, steel surfaces oxidize lightly, and wood components weather naturally, but the underlying geometry remains unchanged. The form first described by Archimedes around 250 BC continues to function as intended, without redesign, software updates, or proprietary restrictions. Critics often raise concerns about appearance, regulation, liability, intermittency, and philosophy. On aesthetics, the design is often described as agricultural and simple rather than refined. Some homeowners' associations resist its visual presence. Yet perception of beauty changes over time, and what appears utilitarian today may be viewed differently in another cultural context. On regulation, height restrictions and permitting rules may apply in some municipalities, but many state-level energy access laws protect small-scale systems below certain thresholds. On safety, the enclosed vertical structure reduces debris ejection risk compared to exposed blade systems, resulting in extremely low documented incident rates for property damage. On intermittency, wind availability across most of the continental United States ranges between 60 and 75% of hours annually at usable speeds, significantly higher than typical residential solar duty cycles, with battery storage compensating for gaps. The final objection is philosophical. Some argue that individuals should not be required to generate their own electricity, viewing power infrastructure as a collective responsibility managed by specialists. Within Amish communities, the response is different. A long-standing perspective holds that money spent on utilities produces no lasting ownership, only temporary access. By contrast, money invested in physical systems, such as copper, steel, and mechanical structures, creates durable assets that remain within families across generations. From that viewpoint, the difference is not simply cost or efficiency. It is ownership versus rental. And over time, reliance on rented systems leads to a condition where even basic infrastructure feels externally controlled. That concludes the account. Please leave your thoughts about this content in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.